Hello, I'm Chris Busby. I'm talking to you from the offices of the Swedish anti-nuclear movement, and I'm here with my friends in the Swedish anti-nuclear movement to say something say something about Fukushima to them and to you. And particularly at the beginning, I should say that we have just published a new book. This, when I say we, I mean my organisation, the European Committee on Radiation Risk, ECRR. And our website is euradcom.org, and we'll write this underneath the stripe so you'll be able to read it. And this book is called Fukushima and Health, What to Expect. The book itself is about 330 pages long, and is effectively an outline of the kinds of things that we're going to find in the populations exposed to the radioactivity from Fukushima. In science, we have the scientific philosophy, which tells us that the antecedent conditions of any phenomenon, when repeated, will recreate the phenomenon. This is one of the cornerstones of science. It's called the Canon of Agreement. It was first written down by John Stuart Mill. And so we know what's going to happen at Fukushima because we know what happened in Chernobyl, although it's been covered up. It's been covered up by the power of the nuclear lobby and by the connection between the World Health Organization and the International Atomic Energy Agency. I was in Ukraine in 2000 at a conference of the Physicians for Chernobyl, of which I am a member. I am one of this organization in the Ukraine called the Physicians of Chernobyl. And what happened there was that there was a massive cover-up of the effects of Chernobyl in this international conference, which was supposedly organized by the World Health Organization, but in reality, behind the scenes, was being run by the International Atomic Energy Agency. So these effects have been covered up. But what we have done is uncovered them. When I talk about we, I'm talking about my colleagues in the ex-Soviet Union, in Belarus and in the Ukraine and in the Russian Republic. People like Alexei Yablokov and Mikhail Malko, Rosa Goncharova, Elena Burlakova, people who are major scientists who have studied the effects of Chernobyl on the ground in the territories where these effects have occurred. And one of the most important of these scientists is Yuri Bandashevsky. Professor Bandashevsky studied the effects of radiocesium and, of course, strontium on children who lived in contaminated areas of Belarus. And what he was able to show, and what he found quite early on, was that the cesium attacked the heart, that it bound to heart muscle, and in the children it destroyed the heart muscle, and it caused cardiac arrhythmias and heart attacks. And in this book, at this conference in Lesbos in 2009, Bandashevsky describes the non-cancer illnesses and conditions in areas of Belarus that were contaminated by these materials. The same materials, of course, that contaminate the population of northern Japan. So we absolutely know what's going to happen there. And we can predict with, I think, considerable accuracy the numbers of cancers and the number of heart attacks and so on. And overall, we can predict a decimation in the lifespan of people who are living in these contaminated areas as a result of their chronic exposure to these radionuclides like strontium-90, cesium-137, plutonium-239, and a whole devil's brew of materials, including, of course, uranium. And many of these materials are in the form of very small particles, nanoparticles, that can be inhaled and that can go through the skin, or they can go through the lung into the lymphatic system and into the bloodstream. And once they're in there, of course, they can bind to the DNA and they can cause significant damage. And what I've been trying to do is to advise people living in these areas who can't leave, and first of all, of course, they should evacuate. But if they can't evacuate, then they should take calcium tablets, because calcium tablets do, in fact, block block the DNA, prevent the access of uranium and strontium to the DNA, and so would have an effect. So if people take these calcium tablets, and they're quite harmless and quite cheap too, they will have a protective effect. So now let's talk about the accident itself. I was on the BBC right from the beginning, and on ITV in the United Kingdom, and also then later on Russia Today and Al Jazeera and various other TV channels, talking about the accident. And from the very beginning, whilst the nuclear industry and the International Atomic Energy Agency were blathering on about how it was just some kind of minor hydrogen explosion, anybody who saw on the camera work on those explosions, it was quite clear that there had been it was a major disaster of the order or worse than Chernobyl. And in fact, I think worse than Chernobyl. And the reason is that the population in the area is much, much higher than in the area of the Chernobyl accident. So the Chernobyl explosion, which was a nuclear explosion and not a hydrogen explosion, which we know from the isotope ratios of the xenon isotopes that were measured in St. Petersburg, you can tell from the ratio of xenon 135 to xenon 133 or xenon 131, either of those, whether it's a critical fission, a prompt criticality or a nuclear explosion, or whether it's not a nuclear explosion but just the contents of a nuclear power station that's got blown up into the air by a hydrogen explosion. You can tell the difference from the xenon isotopes. And so we can do, in essence, the same thing with the xenon isotope ratios from the Fukushima reactor explosion. But nobody has published what those concentrations are. So we had these explosions, and from the beginning I said that they were major, this was a major accident whilst everybody else was playing it down. And for a long time the IAEA were producing bulletins that just didn't make sense. They would say that the radioactivity on the ground measured in microsieverts per hour was something, and the concentration, the contamination on the ground was something which just didn't fit in with the dose rate measurements of microsieverts per hour. So we know that they were lying. Right from the beginning we know that they were lying. But also from the beginning, on the basis of the risk model of the European Committee on Radiation Risk, it was quite easy to show what the effects would be in terms of cancer. We could use the risk model of the ECRR based on the dose rates, and we could also use work that had been done by a Swedish epidemiologist, Martin Tondell, on the effects of cancer in northern Sweden. And so I put all of this together with the measurements that were available of contamination of the area out to 200 kilometers from the site, and I calculated the death yield from cancer, and that wasn't difficult to do. And I gave this as a paper in May in Berlin. And the result of this was that there was going to be about 400,000 extra cancers, not deaths, extra cancers in the 200 kilometer area over the next 50 years. And the reason for this is the population of that area is about 7 million. So we know how many cancers there are going to be. But at that time we didn't realize, even then, that the radioactivity had gone as far south as Tokyo. Because during this time what happened was I was sent car air filters. I'd asked the Japanese people to send me car air filters. And I visited Japan also with a scintillation counter and a gamma spectrometer, and I made various lectures in Japan and took samples. And as a result of looking at these car air filters and looking at the soil samples that I brought back and samples of material that other people sent me, it was possible to show that the concentration of cesium in the air out to 100 kilometers was approximately 1,000 times higher than the concentration of cesium in the air at the time of the global weapons fallout, which is in the 1960s. And at that time, you may recall that President Kennedy and President Khrushchev signed an agreement because they were quite aware that these effects were these contaminations from the global weapons fallout were going to result in a lot of deaths. And in fact, they were quite right, because the current cancer epidemic is a consequence of those materials that were produced into the atmosphere at the time of the global weapons atmospheric testing. But what we found in Japan was that the levels were 1,000 times higher than that, out to 100 kilometers. And one car filter, which I got from Tokyo, showed that even in Tokyo the levels were 300 times higher. And when we put photographic film onto these car filters, so we cut open the car filter and we spread out the element of the car filter and we put a photographic plate on it, you can see little particles, little splodges of light, where these particles of material from the explosion have landed. So it's not a uniform concentration through the atmosphere, it's little particles, invisibly small particles floating about that you inhale. So the upshot of all of this is three things. First of all, the effects of the accident are going to be alarming and are going to be quite significant. Secondly, the concentration of material in the environment out as far as Tokyo, and actually probably much further than that, is also significant. Great parts of northern Japan are highly contaminated with this material. Thirdly, the method that's being used to assess the effects of this on the population are the methods of the International Commission on Radiological Protection, which used to be here in Stockholm. And in fact, the ex-head of the International Commission on Radiological Protection, Lars Erik Holm, is now the Medical Officer of Health for Stockholm, if you can for Sweden, if you can believe such a thing. This is, by the way, a serious conflict of interest, in my opinion. However, the methodology of the ICRP is what's being used in Japan to pacify the population. And the methodology is based entirely on external dose. So we're told that if the external dose is below so many millisieverts, it should be 1 millisievert, but they've taken it up to 30 millisieverts, because otherwise everybody would have to get out. So that in itself is a bit questionable. So on the basis of this, so long as it's below 30 millisieverts, nobody is going to get sick. And in fact, Lars Erik Holm here has been sent out to Japan to be one of the experts that is advising the population of Japan on the health effects. I know. Anyway, don't say a word. We're hoping to bring that guy down, incidentally, using all sorts of magic, human rights stuff. Terrible, isn't it? So, the ICRP risk model that depends upon this external radiation dose is wrong. It's completely wrong. It's totally false, and people will die as a result of application of it. And I hope that the people who are responsible for applying this method will be ultimately sent to jail. Because the real problem is not the external radiation. The problem is the internal radiation that you get from inhaling these little particles that we discovered on the air filters of the cars. And of course, if the cars can inhale these particles, then so can the people of Japan. And then the particle gets inside them, and it goes inside them, and it causes cancer, and it destroys their heart, and so forth. So that's what I have to say about Fukushima to my friends here. Let's go back to the book just briefly, and you can see what's in the book. So, in the book, we see contributions by these eminent scientists. Yuri Bandashevsky, Carmel Mothersill is one of the most famous and most eminent scientists working on genomic instability. This is Professor Inga Schmitz-Feuerhake here, who is the chairman of the European Committee on Radiation Risk, and who has made lots and lots of estimations of the doses to the population affected by the fallout using chromosome damage. Rosa Goncharova is a geneticist, and she talks about her work on genetics and the effects of low doses of radiation. Professor Sawada has shown that the risk model that we have at the moment is incorrect, not only because of the effects that I'm talking about, but also because they didn't take into consideration the fact that there was a lot of fallout. And then we have Professor Malko from Belarus, who has looked at the effects of stomach cancer, the rates of stomach cancer and thyroid cancer, and show quite clearly that the ICRP risk model doesn't predict those. And Professor Gluzman, and now there's Professor Yablokov. Here's Professor Nyagu, this lady here. Now she's looked at the most interesting studies that she's been doing concern the effects on the brain and on behavior of children who've been exposed to the Chernobyl radiation. And she shows that there have been reductions in IQ and all sorts of effects on behavior in children exposed to this, which we will assuredly find in Fukushima. So this destroys the intelligence and the ability to function of young people who are exposed to this radiation. Professor Yablokov, of course, who is a counselor of the Russian Academy of Sciences, who has written a huge book all on his own about the health effects of low doses radiation, published in Chernobyl, published by the New York Academy of Sciences. And here's my friend V.T. Padmanabhan, who's looked at the sex ratio in the offspring and shown that the studies on the sex ratio have been covered up by the American authorities and the Japanese authorities who did that work, Professors Neal and Schull. So there's a lot of stuff here. And finally, we have in this paper the Lesvos Declaration, which was made by all of these eminent scientists. And if we go to the end here, we can find this Lesvos Declaration, because I hope, because it tells us.
I don't think
it's not there.
This is not the book. This is only the selection.
Oh, this is the selection. Yeah. Okay.
You could show some pages in the selection, maybe.
Right. Well, you see, here's an interesting thing. This is from Professor Yablokov. It shows the comparison of the levels of mortality in 6 Russian areas contaminated by the catastrophe compared with 6 that were less contaminated. Now look at that. You see, this is relative mortality. So this is the number of people living, number of people born versus against the number of people dying, and you can see this quite clear effect that more people are dying in the contaminated regions than in the control regions. And they die from all sorts of causes, you see, because it's not just cancer. We're not. I mean, the ICRP risk model is basically a model which examines cancer rates. But in fact, what we see here is that it's not cancer. It's just a general reduction in the lifespan of the people who are contaminated, who are exposed. And this is what Bandashevsky found as well. If we go back to the beginning, I think we put in some of the Bandashevsky's results. Let's see now. Here we are. This is one. Look at this now. This is the demographic index for the Republic of Belarus from 1950 to 2004. And so this is what the demographic index is. It's the number of people born minus the number of people dying, or the other way around. So you can see here that more people are dying than are being born after. Suddenly it drops here after Chernobyl. This is 1986. This point here. And after Chernobyl, it just goes down like a landslide.
This
See
was
that?
economical collapse as well.
No, this was after Chernobyl. This is not exactly the same time.
The Soviet collapsed as well.
Not in 1987 it did. Not in 1986 it didn't. It didn't collapse till later. So this was actually at the point of the Chernobyl accident that you're seeing here. And another thing that he showed here was was the question of heart attacks. You see, now look. Oh yeah, these are the dynamics of the death rates in different districts of Belarus. So here, this is nothing to do with social collapse, because what you see here is that areas of high levels of radiation, you have a different effect to areas of low levels of radiation. But this is the interesting thing. Now look, this is the most important thing that Bandashevsky discovered, and he published this quite early on. In fact, I received his first publication. He sent it to me in the West. It was produced on a samizdat printing press and smuggled out of the country, and I've still got this book. It's a little book, and it's called. It has the dynamics of death rates in children who have different levels of cesium-137. And you know what they did? His colleague Nestorenko actually made an armchair and put contamination monitors into the armchair with sellotape, and he sat children in the armchair and worked out a way of measuring the cesium-137 in those children. In a sort of, it was like an armchair with wheels, and they used to wheel it around to the various villages in the contaminated areas, and they used to sit the children in the armchair and measure the cesium-137 in the children. And what they found quite early on was that they had electrocardiograph modifications as a result of the concentrations of cesium inside them. So they were getting heart conduction problems. So you get this PQR wave. With you put an ECG, you got PQR, 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 and you can tell from the heights of the different wave parts in the electrocardiogram whether the heart is functioning properly or not. And of course, in the children with the high levels of ECG problem. Here, you find that that those children are having heart attacks and they're having cardiac arrhythmias. So they keep falling over. They go white. They don't run about. They're listless. They sit about all the time. They're always sleepy. And of course, you know, because if your heart's not working properly, that's what you do. And you have big brown circles under your eyes because your circulation is not working properly. And then you have a heart attack and die. And so, and these are the results that he found. These are the cesium concentrations in the organism in terms of becquerels per gram versus the number of children without any problems in their heart. So you can see this is the percentage of children. So by the time you get 12 to 26 becquerels of cesium-137 in your body, as measured in this little wheelchair thing I was telling you about, 40% of the children are without ECG modification. That means that 60% have got ECG modification. That means
what is ECG modification?
this is electrocardiogram. It means your heart's not working. It means that 60% of the children who've got this level, 12 to 25 becquerels per kilogram, their heart isn't working. Isn't this extraordinary? And do you know what happened to Bandashevsky when he published this and sent it to the West? He was arrested and sent to jail. He was sent to the Gulag. He was in the Gulag for 3 or 4 years. Hard labour. That's what he got as his price for saving the children. And it was only because of Amnesty International and all of us anti-nuclear people shouting and screaming in the European Parliament and so on that eventually Lukashenko let him out. And they gave him this special passport, you know, called a European passport. So there we are. That's what's going to happen to the people of Fukushima. There. Well, actually not that, but this one. Where were we? The demographic one.
And will it happen to the people of Tokyo also?
Well, to a lesser extent, of course it will. To a lesser extent, this is all dependent upon how long that they are exposed to these materials, and it doesn't have to, of course. They could find clean food for them. They could destroy all of the food. They could refuse to. They could measure. And this is what I was trying to do with my Christopher Busby Foundation with this chap James Ryan. We wanted to buy equipment from Germany to measure the concentration of cesium in the foodstuffs, and to set up a laboratory there where people could bring in their rice or their fish or whatever it happened to be that they normally ate, and find out whether it was radioactive or not. Because I was sent a video made by the Germans of this farmer who farmed about 30 kilometers away from Fukushima, and he had a Geiger counter, and he thought that his rice product was radioactive. So he took it to the government laboratories to have it tested, and they said it's 350 becquerels per kilogram of cesium, and that's below the limit. 500 is the limit, okay? And he didn't believe them. So he took it to another university department and checked it out, and it turned out to be 350,000 becquerels per kilogram, okay? And so he said, that's it, I'm not, you know, that's right. So the fact is that the Japanese authorities and their laboratories are just lying about this in order to keep the lid on this problem. And that's what we were trying to do something about. But not now, of course, because my friend, colleague or whoever he is, James Ryan, he's been attacked into the ground, and he's not going to do any more work on the issue. And so they'll just have to take their chances. But this is their chances, and this is what will happen to them.
Can you show some more in the...
Well, did we have Niagu? I think we did somewhere here. What have we got? Oh yes.
But you told us also that in the international news from Japan, we have only been informed about the reactors, the contained uranium, but that in these hydrogen explosions, you say that fuel rods from the cooling dams were thrown out in the area. How far away could they be thrown?
We don't know how far, but we certainly think probably over a kilometre that they've come down, because they're quite heavy, these rods, you know. But we've seen pictures into the top of those reactors, into those cooling ponds now, that show that everything is fused into a big blob. So there's no integrity at all there now. There are no individual rods. It's just like a big mass, like a big piece of lava. But this is interesting. Look at this. Just bring along this, because this is my colleague Hagen Scherb. Now Scherb is interested in sex ratio. So what he does
Tell
here...
what sex ratio.
Yeah, the sex ratio is the number of boys born to the number of girls. Now, in all human populations that are not affected by genetic damage, that's a constant. It's 1,050 boys to 1,000 girls. And what Sherb has done is he's looked very carefully at the populations of Europe after the Chernobyl accident to see whether there is a genetic damage effect that can be shown by this sex ratio. And there you are, he's found one. See, look, this is in Belarus, all right? You found that there's a sudden step change in the sex ratio. I mean, if you forget his red line and just look at the dots, you can see that it suddenly, and there's 1980, so there's the accident. There's the accident. And you see after the accident, up it goes. So those people who say that Chernobyl didn't, and all of the, like Lars Erik Holm, who say that Chernobyl had no effect, there's the effect. It's easy to see. And it's
more
not...
boy fetuses are
Yes.
dying.
Is
that what you're saying?
No, in this case, you get more boys. You get more boys. And the reason for that I can explain, but it's complicated, so I'm not going to. So you can see that this is, even in Europe, there's a break. See, there's a break in the slope here after Chernobyl if you take all of Europe. So he worked out that this meant that there were like 40,000 dead children as a result of this effect, because of the loss of boys or girls. Where are we now? Let's find. This is Sherby. There we are. That's right. Okay. There we are, sex odds ratio per millisievert. Anyway, if you want to see all of this, you'll have to see the book. These are just some tasters. That's Europe, and this is Central and Eastern Europe. You see there's an effect there as well. Let's go down and see what else I brought in here. Yes, look, here's Denmark, you see? Live birth sex odds in Denmark. There. These are statistically significant effects. And how much radiation from Chernobyl came to Denmark? I mean, small amounts. And yet it was enough to perturb the sex odds ratio. What else have we got? Here's the Russian Federation. Well, there's no argument there. You see? There's 1986. There's the accident, and so suddenly it goes poof. But of course you'd expect that in the Russian Federation. So what have we got here? We've got Down syndrome. So there's an effect on Down syndrome prevalence. He's a biostatistician, this guy. West Berlin. See, there's a big peak in West Berlin there.
And it all happened in a few months.
Yeah, sure. The sudden change.
Why would you think that West Berlin had the big peak?
Well, they did have a lot of rain there.
Oh.
Oh yeah, no, this is an interesting one. Niaga. This is the woman who's talking about the effects of ionizing radiation from Chernobyl on the embryo. And what she showed was that there were enormous effects. You see, now these are no, this is not. This is, hang on. Well, let's find some. There we are. IQ, all right? So here's IQ. So the intelligence scale for children who were irradiated, acutely exposed against the comparison group. And remember, the comparison group are not exposed. They're just from an area with lower levels of exposure. You can see that there are consistent differences in the IQ between the children who were exposed and the children who were not exposed. And here's what's this? This is verbal IQ. So again, you see, exposed group, their verbal IQ is 106. Comparison group from Kiev, 116. So that's a big change in the IQ, 106 to 116. And here's the distribution of verbal IQ. So again, significant differences between the acutely exposed and the control group. And here's a whole range of mental and behavioral disorders. So again, we have organic personality disorders, healthy, so the acutely exposed group, the red one here, this is healthy, okay? So you've got only a few of them are healthy, here, 10%. Whereas the ones, or maybe it's 10, I'm not sure, these might be numbers, but anyway, the point is it's a lot less there than the control group. So the blue is the control group, the red is the exposed group. Mental retardation, disorders of psychological development, behavioral and emotional disorders.
Red is the exposed group.
Yeah, the red is the exposed group. Acutely exposed group, red. Comparison group is blue. This is all data. This woman, Nyagu, who studied these children, she's done a huge study of children in these areas.
All facts.
So it's all facts, that's right. Instead of all this talk that goes on about how radiation is okay and the nuclear power stations are fine and so forth, when you go out there and you measure this stuff and you use scientific analysis on the results, you can show without any difficulty that small amounts of radiation have tremendous and complex and sociologically important effects. So your society is going to suffer as a result of this. You're going to have less intelligent people. Less intelligent people means that you're at a disadvantage economically. So even from the point of view economics, you don't want to have nuclear power stations because they will make all your children stupid. Then you won't be able to compete in the international market, and wouldn't that be a shame?
Don't overdo it. Anyway, have we gone through
Yeah,
the
more or less.
research, more or
that'll
less?
do it, yeah.
The most
so
juicy bit.
so this book is available. You can buy it from any bookseller, and you can also order it from the European Committee on Radiation Risk or from Green Audit. You can go to www.greenaudit.org and buy the book.
And Euradcom.
Yes, and the European Committee on Radiation Risk. So www.euradcom.org. EURADCOM. Okay? Thank you very much for listening.
Vapen som långsiktigt förstör folkhälsan är ett krigsbrott. Ett av USAs många krigsbrott i Irak. Fallujah, för att påminna lite, anfölls i 2 stora angrepp av USA 2004. Staden förstördes till 70%. Det var inte bara så att de här vapen som forskas om användes, utan staden förstördes, skolor, sjukhus, läkare dödades på sjukhuset. Och det råder fortfarande katastrofal humanitär situation i Fallujah, och det vatten och den elinstallationer som USA bombade då har fortfarande inte reparerats. Irak Solidaritet har en insamling, Fallujah-insamlingen, och vi har under det gångna året bidragit med 64 000 svenska kronor till forskningen och publiceringen av de här studierna. Och vi har dessutom en tidning. Jag kommer stå, när vi slängs ut här klockan 6, så kommer jag stå här med bössan och kommer också stå här med bössor, så ni får gärna stödja insamlingen. Och så har vi en utmärkt tidning om läget och situationen i Irak och om USAs krigsbrott, vad som händer. Och vi har ett bokbord där nere där man till exempel kan köpa boken Cultural Cleansing in Irak. En utmärkt för att klargöra situationen och vem som ligger bakom terrorn. USAs inblandning i USA utöver krig, men jag hinner inte gå in på dödskvadroner och sånt, men läs den här boken, den är utmärkt. Tack.
Okay, thank you, Tegan. Now the short time left, I want to give you the opportunity to ask Professor Busby and Ramosha any questions you might have. I'm not a scientist, I can't...
Vision of pendrive. I mean, we can help to publish this in Iraq, for
Sure.
example.
If you've got a stick, I can put it on
Yeah,
a stick.
I have a stick.
Yeah.
And we will have video also. It's
If you send it to us, we can put it
YouTube
on the
Radioactive
homepage.
Well, it's
BSR
quite big.
channel.
So you
Radioactive
need to take it on a
BSR.
stick, but it's quite hard to, I mean, I could put it up on Dropbox or something. I want to show you this picture. These are some of these weird, strange weapons that are occurring. You know, this child here is unharmed except for a stripe which just goes across his body. And the stripe is just extraordinary. So it's just burned his arm completely off. Do you see? And these are not any weapons that anybody knows about. We've got a weapons group in Italy who've been collecting evidence of this sort of thing. And there are some very strange wounds. The people are dead for no reason. Their body is slightly swollen and they can't find any reason for it at all. So this suggests to me that there may be some neutron type weapon out there that we need to get the military to come clean about. We have to do this. Anyway, sorry, I'm burbling on up here. Questions, please. Yeah.
Why do you think there's such a total lack of interest in large parts of the scientific community? I can understand the governments, but the scientists I can't understand.
They're frightened. They're frightened. Everybody's frightened. Everybody. They're frightened of losing their money. They're frightened of being killed. At the moment we have Fukushima. I have to tell you that I'm really involved in there. I've been out to Japan. People, their lives are being threatened. The government is in with the nuclear industry, and people are powerless. People are just scared, and there's no money to do this research. Nobody put them. I was also interested in doing research on the Baltic Sea. The Baltic Sea is highly radioactive because of contamination from Chernobyl and weapons fallout, and people living along the shores of the Baltic Sea are dying as a result of this. We know from work by Martin Tondell that people in northern Sweden are dying as a result of cancer from Chernobyl at quite low doses. Now the problem in Sweden, you have the medical officer of health is a man called Lars Erik Holm. He is the person who is in charge of all research in Sweden into medicine and into these sorts of effects, and he is the ex-head of the International Commission on Radiological Protection. So he is like a top man in the nuclear industry. He is now advising the Japanese government that there will be no outcome from the Fukushima accident, that nobody will get sick. If anybody does get sick, it will be covered up. It is truly as bad as that. And what we're talking about, I have to tell you, is essentially a global attack on the integrity of the human genome. This stuff is not just in Fallujah. You know, we are all in Fallujah. This stuff was found in air filters at Aldermaston in the United Kingdom. And you know, your uncle dies of cancer, your dog gets a breast tumor, your mother gets cancer. Everybody is touched by this, and this is a consequence of weapons fallout, a consequence of all of the nuclear power stations that are exploded or not, or don't explode, just push this stuff out all the time, routinely. And the whole thing is covered up all the time, and nobody can do anything about it because everyone is frightened. The only people who do it, like a few people like me who basically don't care and scratch along with, you know, hardly any money, but we do need a bit of money to do some of these measurements, or to survive. At the moment, I have to say I'm selling my house because I've been attacked so violently by people coming from the nuclear industry that my sources, normal sources of income, have been cut off. I'm normally supported by a couple of charities in the United Kingdom, Roundtree charities, Quaker charities, people doing good works and so on. So I can survive on a low level. But scientists can't, you know. Scientists work for universities. This study that we were going to do in the Baltic Sea, I was going to do with Ole Johansson at the Karolinska Institute. As soon as it got learned that we were going to do this study, Ole lost all of his research funding and they took his laboratory away from him.
And it was months after Fukushima.
Yeah, and that was just after Fukushima too. So these are big dogs. They've got a lot of power, and most people are frightened of them, and that's the answer to your question.
Yes, please.
Although there is a concentration on Fallujah, but in reality there is many areas in Iraq suffered from the same thing. If you go to Al-Ansar Street in Al-Najaf, we see in the same street about 52 persons suffering from cancer in the same time. Nowadays, 35 of them have been died. Many committees go to that place, and everybody say, and all the committees agree that there is no depleted uranium in that house. But you know, and you see now, it's unlogic thing that there is 52 persons in the same street in about 25 houses suffering from the same thing, is cancer, and there is nothing to do about them, and there is somebody say there is no depleted uranium here. In reality, we need independent committees far away from the political conflict worlds to say what's up there. You know, in that street there is a poor people live there. They want to sell houses, their houses, and run away from that what we call it a death street, but they cannot because no one want to get risk and buy their houses. Therefore, they obliged to be in that street, which we called it the death street. Thanks a lot. I mean that we shouldn't stress or concentrate on just one area, that Al-Fallujah. We have Al-Basra, many people suffering there. We have Al-Najaf, many people suffering on Qasr. Even in Baghdad, the center of Iraq, we find the cancer like we have cool or you have suffer from influenza. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Yes. Please. Yes. Please.
I have a question about how to deal with the problem. I mean, we cannot move all Iraqi people from all these places. Is there technologies to clean up? And if we know that is very expensive thing, and maybe never will be 200%, but is there willingness here in this room to put United States in the to pay for this damage to Iraq? And this is a question for you and for the Iraqi representative of the regime in Iraq. I asked, did they, with all this knowledge, did they any time ask American to pay for this cleanup?
Well, these are two questions really. The first question is, can you clean it up, and how much would it cost? And the second question is, can you ask the Americans to pay damages for what they've done? If we take the first question, you can probably clean up the environment, but I don't think that's the problem. I don't think that the environment is the problem anymore. I think it's the people. I think the uranium is in the people, and I think they are contaminated, and you can't really clean them up. That's the problem. You have destroyed the genome of these people, and so their children will have children who will have children who have children with congenital malformations, and this will go on. That's the first point. The second point is, what about the American, is making the Americans pay? Well, there is the Alien Talks something or another act. So it is possible to take the Americans to court for this. It can be done, but nobody will do it.
Okay, for the second time, part, even though I'm here just to talk about uranium and its influence for Iraqi people and suffering for people, in reality I'm the representative of the Minister of Higher Education. I'm not representative for the government to give political statements here. When we were in Lulio, we asked to establish an international committee under the advice of United States to guarantee United Nations to be independent, to prove that there is, and give us a real percentage of depleted uranium in Iraqi environment and its impact on Iraqi people. We also asked them to give them what we call that compromise to the victims, and limit or specify the state and which person who are responsible for separate uranium, depleted uranium, not in Iraq and also in the regional states to Iraq, in the neighborhood. Yeah.
Well, I was contacted by about a year ago, after the first paper was published, by the WHO representative for Iraq, who said that we should have a meeting in Turkey to discuss what is going to be done. And the idea was to investigate these effects in Fallujah all over the whole of Iraq, because we know they're all over the whole of Iraq. We know, because there's enough evidence, mostly in the south, but it's not just in Fallujah. The reason we choose Fallujah is because if you're doing an epidemiological study, you have to choose something, and you have a limited amount of money. But I said, yeah, sure, we can do the whole of Iraq, no problem. But but if you want, and he wanted me to involve myself as an expert advisor or something, I said, well, I have to have control of the study because I don't trust anybody. And I need to be able to go in there and check all of the data and go into the hospitals and see the data as it comes out. And I need to have a few people that I can suddenly pop in there very quickly, that they don't know that they're coming, and they can see what's going on. Because in this whole area, we are in James Bond territory. No question about it. No question about it. Anyway, as soon as that happened, that was the end of it. He said, well, we must have a meeting in Jordan. So I said, okay, when? So he said, well, I'm away at the moment, but give me some dates. So I gave him some dates, and then he said, oh, I'm awfully sorry, I'm in Pakistan during those dates. And so I said, well, actually, I said, when are you coming back? So he said, I'm coming back on some date. I said, well, I can do that date. And he said, and then I didn't hear any more. And that was it. So don't expect too much from the United Nations, right? The United Nations are a bunch of crooks.
Yeah.
I just want to say, the whole thing in earlier it was they were discussing about the hazard with landfills, and of course this is one of them because we have all those tanks that are not even moved; they are still there, and the kids they go there, they play, they even take souvenirs to their homes with dust. I mean, they keep it as necklace, and they play there, dolls, hand-to-mouth activities, and this is what we were talking about in the workshop. And as we had this, if you heard about this, my colleagues they know about it because they are doctors in geology. They know about this phytoremediation, which is very cheap. It is simple.
You can't do it with uranium.
But not because you study about it, and like sunflower, it can be used for radioactive elements.
I'm sorry, I know the World Authority on this is a lady called Sylvia Hanneklaus, who I work with in Germany. She's at the German Agricultural Research Laboratory in Braunschweig, so you can contact her. She's gone all over the world to look for plants which will take uranium out of the soil, and the reason for this is that phosphate fertilizers are being used so much nowadays all over the world. You're putting phosphate every year, phosphate, 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 phosphate. And these fertilizers contain large amounts of uranium because uranium it binds very strongly to phosphate. That's why it binds to DNA, incidentally, because DNA is a phosphate. It has a phosphate backbone. So you find a lot of... So what they needed to do in Germany is they're looking for plants which will take uranium out of the soil. Now they found plants that will take everything out of the soil. Cesium, copper, every element under the sun can be, but not uranium. And the reason is that the plants know, as a result of evolution, that uranium is very bad news. So they've created a special filter on the roots of the plants, and the French have done research on this at Fontenay-aux-Roses in Paris. Also, they're interested in uranium, and they found that the plants will keep the uranium out. So it's very, very difficult to do phytoremediation. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think it's probably not going to help.
Belarusians have techniques.
Well, the problem also, as I said, is as far as the tanks are concerned, you can just pick them up and take them into the desert.
This is the first thing that should have been done.
Yeah, it should have been done. That's right.
They're still there. They haven't moved it even from the first Gulf War.
Yeah.
They're still there. No one has moved them.
I know. I've been there. Yeah, good. Okay. So that can be done, but I don't think the plants will work.
I feel a need to say something. All individuals are welcome here to a meeting, and we are very happy that some of the Iraqi researchers come. We've never been in favor of isolating the Iraqi researchers. Just the opposite. We're part of an international campaign against the assassination of Iraqi academics that has been sanctioned by the United States and by the occupation authorities, the Iraqi occupation authorities. And we have nothing to do with the government of Iraq during that occupation. First, when the Iraqis can exercise their self-determination. However, the fact that the United States now is, at least officially, even if we don't think it's correct, being forced to set a date to withdraw its troops, the fact that the Iraqi government under occupation feels itself under the pressure of the Iraqi people to make demands for the United States to get out and to take responsibility for this, I think just underscores the deep hatred for the occupation through wide sections of the Iraqi population. And we will continue to support the people of Iraq in reconquering their self-determination. And despite any of these disguises with Iraqization and secular divisions in the country that have been left as a result of the occupation. And we will continue from our side, together with the organizations that we work with, to defend the lives of the Iraqi academics, to be able to do their research, because in the end it's only the Iraqis themselves that are capable of doing this. And we think that once Iraq gets a government that is really representative of all the people of Iraq, this might be possible. And only then, maybe, can we have a situation in which it's possible to carry out research in different parts of the country. We know, the last time I met a doctor from Basra who explained that when the Americans occupied Basra, they forbade the people at the hospital from using computers. to keep statistics on the cancer and the records and things like this. And this, of course, was supported by the puppets in Baghdad who gave orders to do whatever the Americans want to do. We're against the occupation of all these forces. We're for the Iraqis, for their self-determination and independence, and we think that this is one of the lasting effects of the war. We can't forget the occupation, we can't forget the war. The people of Iraq must not be left alone to pay the price of this occupation for generations to come. So thank you for coming today, and we hope that you continue to support the struggle of the Iraqis against the occupation and for full independence. Thank you for coming.
Hang on a minute, don't run off. I'm just putting down... I just want to say one more thing. Yeah, okay. Can you read that? No, you can't. I'll make it bigger.
Just enlarge it. It's okay. Enlarge the page. Yeah.
All right. These are 3 websites. If anybody's interested, these are websites that contain much of the stuff that I've been talking to you about. I just want to say that we published a new book today. This is the European Committee on Radiation Risk. We published a book today called Fukushima and Health, What to Expect. And for those, I mean, this is not about Fallujah, but it's about radiation. And what it shows is what truly happened after the Chernobyl accident to people who lived in Belarus and the Ukraine and other territories which were contaminated with the same materials that have contaminated northern Japan now, and which are slowly spreading around the whole planet. And so what this book says, for this new book, it will be on, you'll see it on all of these websites as a news item, and you can get hold of this book by ordering it from any of these websites, or even from an ordinary bookseller, because it's just it's a standard book. So that's a plug for the book. And there's a lot of stuff about Iraq and about our research on Iraq on this website here, the LLRC, the Low Level Radiation Campaign, this is. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening, and I hope you've gone away in such a mood as to help us spread the message that there's a very serious problem with the planet at the moment, and that problem is low levels of ionizing radiation, of radioactivity from various places, including... Yes, well, I'm Chris Busby, but I'm going to talk in a minute about Fukushima. But first of all, there's a very important aspect to nuclear power which has been generally overlooked and is absolutely critical for the general project. And you're going to hear about this from my friend Roland here.
Yes, Roland from Malmborg. Well, I've been fighting nuclear power and bombs since I was a teenager. So for 50 years I've been working with this problem, and yet 2 of the worst aspects I've only got to understand in the last 2 years, and only in the last half year I've understood what I think is the worst risk of nuclear power, and that is the connection to the sun cycle. We can get an electromagnetic pulse from the sun. We can call it an electromagnetic tsunami, and this will wipe out all connected major transformers in the world.
Solar flare, yeah?
It comes after a sunspot and after a solar flare, and it hits the world so quick that it's hard to get any warning. It's half a day, 15 hours it can come. So the warning time is very low if we are not now prepared to take it, but if the world was prepared, we could shut off some of the transformers in the world and they would not burn out, but that would mean that there is a chaos which is inflicted by political or other persons who will get the blame for thousands of people dying.
And what's the problem?
Yes, the problem is that it will destroy transformers, and if it's strong, it will destroy all microcircuits which have been introduced since 1960, when we had a small solar storm, which I remember because my gramophone went only half speed. The woman singing sounded like a bass singer, and I was told it was the effect of the solar spots. And so I remember this thing. So I had personal, but this was a small one of the type you get 3 times per century. But in the ice cores, you can see because of the nitrogen, certain type of nitrogen reaction, that this catastrophe gets very big once in 100 or maximum 500 years. So in 1859, the only thing electrical we had in the world was telegraph system. And so the telegraph stations burned because of the induced electricity, and as far as I can understand, it also melted the electric cords which were in the air. They're safe from in some ways if they're underground, and people had to got to the hospital from electric shocks, but that was everything that happened. People could read the newspaper in Cuba and Hawaii in the midnight because they had what we call northern light or southern light, aurora borealis, all over the world, and this lasts for a few days. And now, if we get the magnitude of 1859, it will destroy all microcircuits, all transformers, and this means that the cooling systems we have for our used fuel, every 3rd year you lift out the core, you're impatient, you want more energy quicker, so you lift it out, but it will give energy so much that you have to cool it for up to 80 years. We're still cooling the kilowatts that Sweden used in the 1960s. We're still cooling them. With new energy, wind energy and other things, yeah. And so in these dams, they will surely be put out of order because they have microcircuits and they need a lot of electricity. The only way to save them from melting within a day and becoming Chernobyl's and Fukushima's is to have the cooling made mechanically by wind power, maybe with flywheels, so you have for the wind-free days. And if this magnitude of 1859 comes, it is possible that the reactors and the used fuel dams will crash within a day, and this means we will have around 4,000 Chernobyl Fukushimas in the same day in the world. And you can imagine how that will disturb for centuries.
And of course it can explode like it did at Chelyabinsk.
Yes, in 1957 we had the first major atomic power accident. It was only one core that was lifted out, and it overheated, the rods melted and went to the bottom, and there was a critical mass, and it threw the whole chemical thing 1 kilometer up in the air, and then it fell down, and that whole landscape is cut off still this day, 50 years afterwards. You're not allowed to pass through it without special permission, and you have genetic damage on the vegetation, it's said there. So this is really the worst aspect we can imagine of nuclear power, and it means that we actually should try to shut down all nuclear power as soon as we can, because every 3rd year we're adding an extra Chernobyl or Fukushima risk. I thought 1 year ago that Sweden had 10 possible Fukushima Chernobyls because we have 10 reactors. And now I find out that there is around 80 lifted out cores. That means 5 million kilos of uranium and plutonium. 5 million. And the pollution of Hiroshima or Nagasaki was around maximum 20 kilos in Hiroshima of uranium maximum 20 kilos of plutonium in Nagasaki, and the people have not understood that unless there is this total atomic war, actually nuclear power is more dangerous than the atomic bombs, because the atomic bombs have so little radioactive material. In Fukushima, for every percentage that is leaked out, you have the pollution of 1,000 Hiroshima bombs. And it surely has been a few percent that have leaked out of these a few million kilos of plutonium and uranium that has been in the six, not only the 6 reactors, but in the maybe, who knows, maybe 20 outlifted hearth, do you call it? No, what do you call it? The
cores.
Cores, yes. And we know also then in Fukushima that many of these rods have been thrown out with the explosion. The company and the Liberal Democratic Party, whose election campaigns largely was paid by the atomic industry, have not told us the truth.
In Sweden,
well, I mean, they say, oh, the one core has melted a bit, sort of, but what about all these cores that were lifted out?
They went up in the air and they came pitter-patter down, and then I've heard from people who've seen this on the ground in Fukushima that they haven't tried to do anything. They've come with bulldozers and they pushed them all into the ground. So these
and they hope they get them 1 meter down, but some of it will still be turned up again when they go with it. And I guess that if a child finds this and holds it for 1 minute, they are dead.
They're dead, yes.
Dear wise men, what can we do? So little time, so much to do.
Yes, as I said, we have to stop nuclear power very quickly, because every 3rd year we get a new Fukushima Chernobyl risk from every reactor in the world.
I think that if we can use human rights legislation, we can stop this. I think the time has come for us to use all of the very important legislation that's been put into position by the United Nations, which is all there, but nobody has ever used it. And I think the time has come for us to use it, to actually go and say, look, all of these things are possible. All of these things could happen, and some of these things have happened. And so the time has come to stop it. And you people who've made all of these laws and these very wise sayings about human beings and how they should live together in harmony, and how everybody has the right to live in an environment where they're safe and where nobody is threatening to kill them, and where the pollution is such that their children are not going to die of cancer, and all of these things. And they're all there written down and enshrined in statute. It's about time they started to apply them to the real world. And I think we can do that.
As far as we know, not one nuclear plant or cooling waste plant has counted with the electromagnetic pulse of the solar storms.
Risk.
So and I mean, the problem is, if you go to the people of Naples and under the Vesuvius, and you tell them you are the next Pompeii, they won't listen. And here we have actually built the volcano ourselves, so that the nuclear reactors will make the Pompeii of our whole civilization. Because even without nuclear power, this catastrophe is so bad that because the National Science Association of America and the
you mean solar flare, yeah?
NASA says that if we get a magnitude of 1859, which perhaps could be called the 200-year maximum, they count that hundreds of millions of people will thirst, hunger and freeze or sweat to death. Hundreds of millions.
Starve to death, yeah?
And after 1 day, the big cities the only drinking water they will have is the turn of the toilet. in polluted circumstances. That's the drinking water they have in the big cities. And people will flee out to the barnyards around, and they probably kill the farmers and
but anyway,
eat the
how do we
seeds of next year.
what has to be done?
Hallelujah!
Let's not go too far with this, all right?
What has to be done to the power station?
Drinking our toilet water and killing each other. I think nuclear is bad enough.
Yes.
How do we disarm the nuclear power station? Or tell practicalities.
Well, practically, Roland has got one answer. There are plenty of answers. You can have pumped storage, so you could have hydroelectric storage. You could have, you could burn hydrogen. There are lots of ways you can create energy without electricity. I mean, you just have to think about it. That's all. You can do this. So if you decide on the, I mean, we're very clever, the human race. So you can actually decide that this is the problem, and then you can find a solution. There are lots and lots of ways.
But it takes time, and we don't have it. So
no,
what is the fastest? What is the fastest way?
The fastest way would be to have pumped storage. I mean, you've only got to keep these things cool for long enough to bring all of these systems back online. Or you could separate you could actually build new cooling systems whereby you separated these cores in such a way that you could have a metal finned container with water in, rather like these copper canisters that they're going to bury under the ground, which conducts the heat away, and then rather like air cooling, then the air can cool the cores with little fins and so on, and if the amount of nuclear material in there is small enough, then you're okay. You have.
But that would take long time of production to fix that.
No, really. If somebody had the decision to do it, if somebody thought, well, this is a problem, we've got to do something about it, it could be done in a few months. Now.
You mean like a system like we have a cooler in a car where it spreads out?
Yes.
But you are talking copper canisters?
What?
You're talking copper canisters?
No, I'm talking
about
it's
before
just air cooling. That's all. I mean, a Volkswagen car, for instance, the old Volkswagen Beetle is air cooled. You just blow air over fins. A motorcycle is air cooled. You don't have any cooling in a motorcycle.
How do you get this force to blow it if we don't have electricity?
You don't need to. You have fins. If you have fins, just
what is fin?
A fin is like a piece of
thin metal sticking out, so that the surface connection with air is big enough.
You increase a big surface area, you see, and then as it gets hot, it sucks the air up like this, and the air just normally goes through it.
So it has to be some kind of secure net.
Yeah, like
in the air.
Like a little pond, a much smaller pond, with it made of metal, copper perhaps, and then lots and lots of metal fins, metal kind of plates coming off it, welded to it.
And just in air?
Yeah, sure.
Without water?
Like you have in a computer, the core of a computer has got a lot of metal sticking out like that.
It's called a heat sink.
But then that particular place would be very radioactive, yeah?
Well, it wouldn't
no, not until the rods melt.
No more radioactive.
Well,
if it gets too hot,
no, they won't. The idea is we're going to cool them, and we cool them with air cooling.
They can be almost 300 degrees centigrade without melting.
Yeah,
so you can cool them mechanically.
So air would be just enough?
Yeah, sure.
But we can.
What do you think about it?
Well, I would perhaps complete it with supplement it with wind power stored in big flywheels or something, so that you have some fanning or circulation to make it more efficient. But I think also that it could be.
You have to separate them up. At the moment, they're all together, and so they've operated it in such a way that I mean, those ones at Fukushima, they put them on top of each other because they ran out of space.
5 in 1.
Yeah, that's right. So they kept cramming them into the same thing. You see, I mean, and that's just asking for trouble. And of course, they got trouble. That's what happened.
So that boiled.
They boiled dry very quickly, and then they all melted, and there was a nuclear explosion, in my opinion.
So let's suggest our watchers.
We have. That's it.
That they start business doing these techniques with the nuclear waste. Yeah.
Yes, sure, absolutely.
And urgently.
But you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. That's the problem.
Okay.
You can take a nuclear industry to a problem, but you can't make them solve it. Especially when it's expensive.
But I think also really, how do we get this knowledge out? And one thing is that we could demand to get description of this problem from our atomic security
I think that would be
boards
good.
in the different countries,
I think we
because
can do that.
they should be the servants of
Yeah.
the people, not only the servants of the industry, which they've
Become.
thought they are.
There are all sorts of human rights laws that enable us to actually pull that particular piece of string and make it happen.
And what is that book called that is so good?
Yes, it's called it's called Strategies for Environmental Law, or something like Environmental Law Strategies. But I haven't got the actual title. I mean, we'll put the title into the video. Okay?
Actually,
So you buy this book. Everybody should buy this book. It's a woman that I met in Salzburg at a big conference on nuclear law. And this book tells you actually how to do it. So you know, you don't even have to be a lawyer. It's got like ways in which, and people that you write to, and who you write to, and what you say.
And
all
even
of
the
these
text
things, you know.
suggestions.
It's got everything. It's got everything. So, and I don't want to have to be the only person doing this stuff. All right. I want some of you people to buy this book and to apply yourself to the law inside this book and to pull these people off their pedestals, because it's not difficult.
And also, some young people should consciously go into law studies with the aim of making good environmental laws. Also
Linda Malone, that's the woman's name. She's Linda Malone.
How do you spell Malone?
M-A-L-O-N-E. Anyway, we'll stick it on the at the bottom.
Under the video, in the info.
Yeah, and Scott Pasternak. So it's Linda Malone, Linda A. Malone, of the School of Law of School of Law of in Virginia. It's Virginia Law School.
United States, yeah?
In the United States. And she's great, this woman. She's great. And so this is environmental strategies for saving the planet legally, and it can be done. It's a fantastic book. Absolutely fantastic.
Okay, thanks
And
so
cheap.
much. Thanks so much.
That
Heroes.
was chapter 1. Chapter.
Okay, I'm Chris Busby. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the attacks that have been coming at me. There's a sort of global tsunami of attacks on Chris Busby that started last week with George Monbiot in The Guardian. But it wasn't just George Monbiot in The Guardian. I can tell you it's attacks coming from Swedish Doctors for the Environment, from Ingrid Eckermann, from all sorts of people who are attacking me now and trying to destroy my credibility. But actually, I have a lot of friends, you know. I have a lot of friends. And I'm in the offices of the Swedish anti-nuclear movement here, which is why you can see all of these things. And talking to my friends about all of these attacks, and also about Fukushima. And I want to talk a little bit to you about these attacks, and to explain what it is that's been happening. The real target for these attacks is not me, you see. The real target for these attacks is the credibility of the European Committee on Radiation Risk, who I represent mainly. And the attack is also aimed at destroying my credibility with regard to something very, very important that I've discovered in the last few months. And this is the existence of a new weapon, the existence of a weapon that was used by the United States forces in Fallujah in Iraq, and either produces or is made of enriched uranium. Now this is an extraordinary discovery. It's not a particularly expected discovery. We found out by looking at hair samples of the mothers of children with congenital anomalies in Fallujah in Iraq that some weapon had been used that either is made of or produces enriched uranium. So there is a secret weapon out there that people don't want us to talk about. And now this is actually to the nightmare of the United States military authorities and those people who use this weapon. It's out there. It's actually in a peer-reviewed journal that this exists. And as Joseph Conrad once said, when all the shouting is over, the grim silence of facts remains. And the facts here are that the United States and possibly the Israelis and other modern Western military outfits have been using this substance which is contaminating Iraq and certainly contaminating the planet. And this is a very serious matter.
Sweden too.
This stuff goes all over the place. Anyway, so the real target for this character assassination of me is not me. It's the evidence that this weapon exists. And of course, the evidence that Fukushima is going to kill an awful lot of people. So, taken together, what that shows is that the risk model, the current risk model for radiation, is totally wrong, which is something that my group, the European Committee on Radiation Risk, have been saying for a very long time. So that's the first point. What the nuclear and military authorities have to do, what the nuclear military lobby has to do, is they have to destroy the opposition to nuclear. And the opposition to nuclear resides with the anti-nuclear movement, with the anti-depleted uranium movement, and with the Green parties of the world. So what they want to do is to cut the Green Party off from the science that shows that radiation is unsafe. But this is where the Green parties came in, because they are the only political parties that ever really opposed nuclear, and they became powerful on the back of anti-nuclear. This is where they came from. And if they leave anti-nuclear, if they move away from it, if they believe these attacks, and they allow themselves to be confused by the attacks on the science that shows that they're right, then they will go nowhere. They will end up as worthless parties, along with a lot of other worthless parties that will just produce the same mess that we are in at the moment. The substance of the attacks is entirely wrong. So the argument is that Chris Busby is a false scientist because he's associated with selling worthless tablets for lots of money to the poor people of Japan in order to make himself rich. So we'll take these arguments in turn. The first argument is the pills. Now, what I have suggested, and I suggested it some time ago, is that you can block the access of strontium-90 and uranium, which are the worst isotopes, worst nuclides coming from Fukushima. You can block their attachment to the DNA by taking calcium supplements. You take calcium binds to the DNA, and it prevents the strontium-90 and the uranium binding to the DNA. So the first thing that these people who are attacking me say is that this isn't true. They say this is nonsense. There's actually a woman called Geraldine Thomas, who's a professor at Imperial College, who said this, who said that it is untrue. And in fact, she's wrong. What we have is at least 5 or 6 scientific papers that were published in the 1960s that show that strontium-90 is kept away from the DNA after people take calcium tablets. They did experiments with humans, they did experiments with rats. So what she says isn't true, and what we're going to do is, and what we have already done in fact, is we have sent her a letter asking her to retract, and if she doesn't retract we will sue her for libel, because she is affecting my reputation on the basis of something which is manifestly incorrect and can be proven to be incorrect in a court of law. So the first thing is they will have to retract. There is no question about that. Now, so the pills do work. That's the first thing. The second question is, do I make money out of the pills? Well, actually, in fact, there are no pills. And the reason that there are no pills is because as soon as this guy, my colleague, well, not colleague, but a businessman in Japan called James Ryan, started to consider making these pills, he was attacked on all sides. He was attacked by the Japanese government. He was refused permission to import the pills into Japan. He wasn't able to make an organization, the Chris Busby Foundation for the Children of Fukushima. He couldn't make it because nobody would join with him as directors on the board of this new company because they were all frightened. And he received all sorts of death threats. So actually no pills were made, no money has passed hands. I've certainly not received any money, and it was never intended that I should receive money. But any of the profits from the pills would have gone to the foundation to buy equipment for measuring radioactivity. So and all of this is on, this statement that I'm making to you is all on the website of the low-level radiation campaign as a general statement. Now, who organizes this foundation? Well, the foundation is organized by a man called James Ryan, who's an American living in Japan, who has a child who is seriously ill and on life support. And he said to me when he phoned me up that he couldn't bear the idea of other parents having to live with children who were seriously ill, so he wanted to do something about it. And he asked me if he could use my name to set up a foundation to try and do something about it. And I said yes. So that's the limit of my involvement with this foundation. then as far as making measurements on material and on samples that are being sent from Japan, no samples have been sent from Japan. The idea was to set up a laboratory, the Busby laboratory in Japan. I was going to advise them on what equipment to get, and they were going to make independent measurements in Japan of the concentrations of radionuclides in various substances that were being brought in. So that's about it. As far as this whole situation is concerned, we are going to take some kind of libel action against Imperial College and against that against the people who advised George Monbiot incorrectly with regard to these statements about whether the pills are whether they work or whether they don't work. And one other statement that was made is that that cesium, the cesium released from the nuclear power station, I said that it caused heart attacks in children, and there was a statement made by a Japanese scientist, member of the ICRP, that this was nonsense. But actually there's also plenty of evidence that cesium binds to heart muscles in children and causes heart attacks, and it's all in the scientific literature. So that's all that I have to say about this, and thank you very much for listening. Watch this space. You will find the consequences of our attacks on the Guardian newspaper and on the people who are attacking us quite entertaining. Thank you.
Because when I checked the table in my garden, you know, suddenly there was the measure would go up very far. This Geiger meter I used after Chernobyl, it was adjusted for German atomic laboratories, and at 20 counts per second there would be an optic and sound signal that the laboratory should be emptied and sanitized. And I had to turn those things off, because even 1 year after Chernobyl, indoors and outdoors, the signal was there. It was always over 20. And what I don't know is what was the normal level before 1945, before we started spreading, because now normal radioactivity is often counted as including the pollution of all the tests and the daily
But I have to tell you that in the time I've been doing it, because I had a very good Geiger counter which was bought for me by the Irish government in 1998, and in the whole time since 1998 to now, it's gone up by about 50%. It's gone up.
It's still going up.
It's still going up.
Of course.
Oh dear. Well, anyway,
it was sort of nothing 50 years ago.
No.
It was zero 50 years
No, it
ago.
wasn't zero, because there's always a bit.
No,
of, you know.
but when I went in the underground, it could go down to 3 or 5, something like that.
Right.
But under the drain pipes from the roofs of Stockholm,
Yeah,
it would go up to 3,000.
Yeah.
And when I put it through the X-ray machine of the airport, it went out to 1,500. So it was double level of the X-ray machines of the airport. And then I also traveled, so I saw that it was actually a bit more north of Stockholm, but
So what
not.
did you get? You got 30,000 in Stockholm.
No, 3,000 under the hose pipers.
About 3. Then. Normally about 3 in the under.
Probably something like that.
Okay, so that's 1,000 times after practice.
Yeah,
I think that.
and also another comparison that radioactive watch from the 1950s would give around 200, and that was around that level all over my car. I got this thing 10 days, I think, after Chernobyl, or if it was even more. So it probably could have been more.
You know, the HELCOM data which we got shows us that we've got enormous amounts of radioactivity in the Baltic Sea, enormous. And we took a scintillation detector down into Latvia along the coast there. And we got a very big peak from cesium-137 this year. This year, it's still there.
In the summer?
Yeah.
And that is Chernobyl, as far as you can understand.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But there were some news people said a few days ago, which was in other parts of the world, and which then one wonders is high levels. Is it Fukushima puffing more things, or might there be something else happening somewhere in the world?
I think it is Fukushima. I think it's too much of a coincidence that recently there was a big increase in xenon 135 reported by TEPCO, and xenon 131 reported by TEPCO, and everyone was saying, oh, you know, it means that the reactor's still burning and so forth. But of course, xenon 131 is the daughter of iodine 131, but they didn't mention iodine 131. Okay? Nobody said, oh, that we found a load of iodine 131. They said we found a load of xenon 131. See, but it's the daughter product. So and then suddenly, about 10 days later or 7 days later, they start saying, oh, we found a load of iodine 131 in Europe. You see. Now, to me, that seems to be very, very coincidental. That you've got a load of xenon 131 and iodine 131 suddenly in Fukushima, and then the next thing is you find it in Europe. And now they're saying, oh, it was when somebody made a mistake when we were refueling some German reactors in southern Germany, and they released a load of iodine. That's the story.
Well, that's if that was true, it's a serious story, isn't it?
I suppose so. But anyway, it's a much more serious story that this thing is still, because from the ratio of the xenon isotopes, and I actually did this because I took the TEPCO ratio, I took the TEPCO measurements and made the ratio. You can show that 15 hours before the measurement was made, 48 hours before the measurement was made, that was a fission accident. A fission occurred.
I think that after the accident in Fukushima, they sometimes said measurements of iodine, and I reflected, well, that's the value that gives the lowest one, because it's in a week most of it is gone. So so that they get, but still those numbers were very serious. And then if you know that the ratio of strontium and cesium will then be 100 times worse.
I'm measuring all that. They send me all these samples from Japan.
And I mean, what about the water currents of the seas?
That will just deposit the cesium up and down the coast.
Yes, but I mean, won't it spread? How long time will it take to spread around the whole world in the seas?
I don't think it will. I mean, the sea is very big. I don't think that's a problem. The problem will be fish that are caught and then exported, and mostly it'll be shellfish along the coast of.
But there are these currents going all over the world, back and forth to the.
Sure. Yeah. No, well, it will contaminate. It'll certainly contaminate the oceans, but the levels will be very small, and I don't think that they will constitute a harmful route. For me, the most important route is inhalation. Yeah. You see,
but I find that many resistors to atomic power don't know that there is the concentration in the food chains of radioactive materials, just as it is with PCB and mercury and DDT. So that was actually what made me, when I was 17 years old, around 1963, to turn against nuclear power, because I saw the numbers from the river outside Hanford, and if they put the small level in the river of radioactivity number 1, when it came up to the yolk, the yellow of the egg of the prey birds, it was 1/2 million times more radioactive.
Yeah, sure.
And of course already in the fish it was 10,000 times and so on. So this is also that they say it's so little so it doesn't matter, but then we have to multiply it with 1,000 times, or in this case even 500,000 times.
We know about this from Sellafield. I mean, a huge amount of stuff went from Sellafield into the Irish Sea, and and it's measured every year in the fish.
Could you elaborate? What were sort of measures before the atomic industry era?
Well, zero.
That's what I said, and you said no, it wasn't.
No. This is in terms of these isotopes like cesium and so on, is zero.
Yeah.
In terms of background radiation like this, then you've got cosmic rays, and you've got some gamma radiation
Yes.
coming off from the ground.
In Sweden, after Chernobyl,
A bit of uranium too.
the official measurements of radioactivity was made 1 meter over the ground.
Yeah.
And my qualified guess is that we were used to the radioactivity trapped in the rocks, and they hit a 2 meter long man an average 1 meter from the ground. But this was not the type of radiation we got from Chernobyl. No. So if I held the Geiger meter 1 meter over the ground, it would sometimes only be 100 part of what it was on the soil. And when we walk in the soil, this is turned up, and we are breathing it in, and it also, as you say, can go through.
The National Radiological Protection Board made a map in 1986 of grids all over the United Kingdom, and they coloured these grids according to the background radiation, gamma radiation, 1 meter above the ground. Yeah, and the average level above the ground is about 40 microsieverts per hour. About 40 microsieverts
Which year?
per hour. This was about 1989, 90.
But that is
like
after Chernobyl.
After Chernobyl, yeah. Sure, but a lot of Chernobyl didn't fall in southern England. You know, the rain was mostly in Wales and in Scotland and Yorkshire. They didn't have very much Chernobyl radiation in southern England. The cloud really didn't go there. But anyway, the point is that at that time it was about 30 to 40 nanosieverts per hour. Now, if I go out with my Geiger counter and measure it, it's 180 nanosieverts per hour. Okay? So something very odd has happened in the last 10, 15 years.
And this was before Fukushima.
Yeah, before Fukushima, that's right. Mm. And I brought a case against Hinkley Point on the basis of that. You know, the way they're building this new nuclear power station, they had to produce a report to say that there was a certain amount of radioactivity there, because the law says that they can't have more than a certain amount of radioactivity there for the workers, you see. And so they said, oh, it's 50 nanosieverts per hour. And I thought, well, that's a bit funny, it can't be right. So I went down there with Rosa, with my daughter, and 2 Geiger counters, and I measured it, and it was 180 to 250 nanosieverts per hour. So first of all, that means that the old power station has been contaminating the ground there. But secondly, it means that something else has been
150 to
250.
Yeah,
is what I measured. And I've actually made a video of this, so I've got Rosa with the camera videoing me measuring it with the Geiger counter and a GPS that tells.
And this is far from the reactor, it's in the kilometers away from it.
No, this is in a field about 200-300 meters away where they're going to build a new nuclear power station. Okay. Yeah. But I mean, you can measure these levels quite far away. It's not just there. You know, if you go a kilometer away, you still get these levels, 150 nanosieverts per hour.
It means actually no one should work there.
That's right. But that's why they had to keep the levels low, and I had to pretend that the levels were low, you see, because their own law says that they can't have people working there. Yeah. I know. It's just completely balmy, the whole business. And I don't know what's causing it. I really don't know what's causing it, but I suspect it's Fallujah, it's Iraq. I think that they dropped enormous amounts of radioactivity in the form of uranium. Somebody has said 3,500 tons of uranium in these new uranium weapons that dropped in Iraq in Gulf War.
Yeah, I heard 2,000 tons the first year.
Well, if you imagine if all of that's been turned into an aerosol and then floats all around.
But that's only Iraq, and Iraq, I think that the United States have admitted that they used this, but there's total silence. They don't admit what has happened in Afghanistan, and I mean, if they tried to melt themselves into the mountains where Bin Laden was with a half-ton bombs, my guess is that there was a lot of uranium in those bombs.
In fact, there was a guy called Mohammed something or another who measured the urine concentrations of uranium. And Ted Wayman did that in people in hospital there, and they got enormously high levels of uranium in the urine, but it wasn't depleted uranium. That was the problem, you see. Mm-hmm. That's why this thing that they're attacking me about is so important, because I believe that since for a long time now they haven't been using depleted uranium, they've been using either natural or enriched uranium, just to cover their back.
And we don't know why. It must be that there's some effect in the weapon that can't be reached with depleted.
Or it could just be that they want to cover their backs, you know, in some way, that they just don't have to have some way in which you can check up on them.
Or that they have scrapped so many old atomic weapons that they don't bother whether it's depleted or enriched uranium.
So if that's the case, what they will have done is they will have taken the enriched uranium warheads and melted them into the depleted uranium to make a sort of mixture, which is slightly enriched, you know, which is just about makes it legal.
Because one heard very long ago that Israel had used enriched uranium in I think Lebanon, was it? Or
that was that. We found that. We did that. And that was no question about that, because we had two different laboratories checking it. And one of the laboratories was my friend David Assender at the University of Wales Institute of Oceanography in Anglesey. And he uses a very sophisticated method using alpha spectrometry, and he got the same result as the results they got from Harwell. So these are two separate laboratories using two different techniques who got both the same results. And after that he was sacked. His laboratory was shut down, all his equipment was sold.
Typical.
3 weeks after that report, he was kicked out. So there you are. Don't give them a bad time, or you might lose your job.
Or please do. Don't give up and give the world some truth.
Yeah, sure.
That's
Anyway, I don't have a job, so I don't have to worry.
To me, the key question,
Which is?
and also international in Europe, also in Europe, the same in Germany. They support their coal mines, their nuclear reactors, and all heavy industry, nuclear industry and coal and everything. So if we can stop these subsidies, we can change the whole picture in a very short time. And I think this is such a strong basis for such a policy that I don't think it's impossible to do. But of course we have strong enemies, we have strong business interests against it, but we have to, that's why I mean the only way is to engage intellectual people who understand this reasoning, to understand your analysis, to understand my analysis, to understand basic logic. Very basic logic.
So to change the tax system.
Yeah, to change the tax system, for example, is one very important thing. And to admit, and that's where I'm also critical to the Green Party, as I've told you also, we have to be...
Can you give examples?
We have to say, we have to admit that we have to make a priority between fighting climate and fighting nuclear energy. Unless we do that, we are lost. We can't do both at the same time.
Are you saying that in Sweden that the Green Party in Sweden supports a taxation system that gives money to the nuclear industry?
Exactly.
Well, that's
Can you make
outrageous.
it?
That's absolutely outrageous.
Elaborate in details how.
Elaborate, yes. By taxing climate change, climate factors.
Okay.
So it's like a carbon tax.
Carbon tax.
Yeah,
right.
and then
the carbon tax is 20 times higher than is defensible. That you can defend with logical arguments.
There's a tax on nuclear too.
It's far too high. Yes, I know. But this is much higher. This is much higher. And that's...
so this diverts people's money to the development of nuclear industry.
When you overtax coal and oil, you support nuclear industry because it makes it easier for them to sell electricity.
If the Swedish nuclear power's oil pollution is in some country that is not in the tax system, it's not put as a tax in Sweden because in Sweden it's not polluting with oil or coal.
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest two coal plants of the United States is, as I understand, mainly used for enriching preparing the uranium for the nuclear plants.
But my point is that carbon tax in Sweden has no effect whatsoever on carbon emissions. no effect whatsoever on carbon emissions. They affect emissions in Sweden, but they increase emissions in other countries. That's how the pricing system works, and everybody agrees on
We
this.
buy the pollution from China.
Yeah, that's everybody agrees on that. But again, there's a strong interest prohibiting these facts to reach to the opinion,
But
to the public.
you've written a lot of this stuff down in your book, haven't you?
I have, yes. It's
Well,
in
then we
my-
have to do your book, don't we?
It's in-
Okay?
pardon?
We have to finish your book and get
Yeah,
it
we
out.
have
but
to
also,
do it in English.
but
We have to
I'm
do it in
thinking
English.
that maybe the green movement should need to take some lectures by you. I mean, the problem is that
We have it lectures on
Yeah,
the
we have
internet.
had lectures.
Yeah.
But you see, there are strong, what you call it, prejudices also among green people. Because they think that everything that is green should be supported. But they don't realize by having too high carbon taxes, you support nuclear energy.
It's a complex system.
Very few understand this.
Yeah.
And if we can have people, our own people to understand this, we are going to be coming a long
But if
way.
they included the total cost of the nuclear fuel cycle, then in fact that would work, because the nuclear fuel cycle is not carbon free at all. And
No,
this
it's
is the
not,
problem,
no,
is that
no.
they've sold themselves as carbon free, whereas actually,
It's
if
not.
you take the entire cycle from the mining, just as Roland says, all
No.
these coal-fired plants that are involved in producing electricity for refining the uranium, right through to all the energy that's required to move the stuff about and build the power stations, and all, if you take a holistic view of it, it's by no means carbon neutral. But of course the problem is that those externalities are not included in the equation. They just consider that the electricity is somehow magically produced and is carbon free.
But the problem is that the externalities
Externalities, yeah.
in carbon are overestimated in the Swedish tax system. It's underestimated for nuclear energy.
Right.
So you have an imbalance there, which is a huge subsidy to the nuclear companies in Sweden. Furthermore, you have other subsidies like the insurance business.
Yeah,
We are
sure.
still paying for the big disasters, aren't we? Despite what Centre Party said, we're still paying. They did nothing about that promise, did they?
No,
No.
well, they say
So-
that they will have to pay some perhaps 1 million euro or something like the first. But if you see
Nothing like
that,
before
I
the-
guess in Fukushima now they already have claims perhaps like 300 millions of euros from different sources. So I think also I read somewhere about Chernobyl that at that time, rather soon after that the cost was estimated at least to 300 million euros at that time. So
Yeah, they're huge costs. So if you listen to Maud Olofsson, what she said, what she promised, nuclear energy in Sweden would be dead right away, of course.
sorry,
If
I was wrong. I mean of course milliards.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Billions.
American billions. Yes, it's
Because as soon as you take away this law requiring states to cover insurance costs, nuclear energy is dead, not only in Sweden but also internationally. It's dead. I mean, it's fairly simple.
Thank you very
in
much,
that way.
Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks. Coming.
Hey.
Thank you all.
You are the one audience.
Yeah.